Hey geometry team, welcome to unit 6. We are going to be working on congruent triangles for this entire unit. So if you like three-sided shapes, you're in the right place. This is where you want to be. Let's get going on it. So to start off with, congruent triangles are only congruent if all three sides of both triangles are congruent to each other. So you've got one side, and one side that are all congruent to each other. If even one of the sides on one doesn't match the other, it's a no-go. Okay? All the angles are also going to be congruent. So somewhere, each angle on the blue guy is going to have a matching angle on the red guy. That's what makes congruent triangles, is everything is congruent. Now, to make sure you name them correctly, you have to name them with the congruent corners in the right places, or you're going to have messed it up. And so let's look at some possible ways this could happen. So if you chose to say that triangle ABC was congruent to triangle XYZ, what you're saying is that angle A is congruent to angle X, because the order you put them in here tells you which ones are going to be congruent. So A must be congruent to X, and then B must be congruent to Y, and C must be congruent to Z, okay? And so you're saying that those angles match up in that order. So if you wrote it that triangle ABC was congruent to triangle XZY, then you're saying, yeah, the triangles are still congruent, but in this case, A would be congruent to X, but B would be congruent to Z if you write it this way. And then C must be congruent to Y if you write it this way. So the order you write your triangle in is extremely important. It tells you which parts match up with which parts in the different triangles. So watch out for that as we go through stuff and make sure that you name things properly. All right? So triangles being congruent, there are going to be 5 ways to be able to tell that triangles are congruent. Certain things have to happen. Yeah, all the sides must be congruent and all the angles are congruent, but the nice thing is if you only have 3 things, you can still tell that they're congruent. Okay, so the 5 ways are SSS, which stands for side, 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 and we're going to show it on another slide, so calm down. There's SAS for side, angle, side. There's ASA for angle, side, angle. There's AAS for angle, angle, side. And there's HLR for hypotenuse, leg, and a right angle. Sometimes you will see this written as just hypotenuse, leg, because if you have a hypotenuse, you can assume it's a right triangle, and so you don't need to say right. It just depends on if you like 3 letters or 2 letters. Some people like that all of these have 3 letters. Some people are lazy and they're like, I don't want to write a 3rd letter if I don't have to, so they write hypotenuse, leg. So you will see both of those running around. They both mean the same thing. Okay? So SSS is short for the side, side, side congruent setup. And what that means is if 3 sides of the triangles are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. So if you have a side, and then another side, and then a 3rd side, all being congruent, then you can say the triangles are congruent. Okay? So if you looked at these 2 triangles and thought, wow, I have AC is congruent to DF, and AB is congruent to DE, and then CB is congruent to FE, then, oh wow, I've got 3 sides of a triangle. That's side, side, side. I can say that the triangles are congruent. Alrighty, come here. If you have the SAS, or side, angle, side, congruency scheme, what that means is that you have 2 sides and the angle between them. That's why it's side, angle, side, because the angle is the one between the 2 sides. And if you have that, you can tell that a triangle is congruent with just those 3 pieces. So here I have AC is congruent to DE, and I have AB is congruent to AC was congruent to DE. These are in the wrong place. AC is congruent to DE, and AB is supposed to be congruent to DF. So pretend that that says DF and not DE. Oops. And then we have A is congruent to D. And notice that angle A and angle D are in between the two sides that we knew were congruent. If it's the one that's stuck in that vertex between them, then you know it's side angle side congruence. And yes, if you have this set up, then you know for sure that your triangles are congruent and that all the parts are the same size. But all you need to tell that are these three. Okay? The next one we have is ASA, which stands for angle side angle. And again, order is important. If you have angle side angle, that's telling you that you have an angle, and then the side in between those two angles are congruent. So here, A and D are congruent, B and F are congruent, and then A, B, and DF are congruent. You notice it's the side that's sandwiched in between the angles, just like the side is sandwiched between the two angles in the abbreviation. When you have this is called angle side angle, and if these are all congruent, then you know that the whole triangle is congruent, just from those three things. Side angle angle is another one that we can tell makes triangles congruent. Again, order matters. In this case, you have two angles together, but then the side is not in between them. So you could do angle, angle, side, and it still wouldn't be in between them. And so you sometimes see this written as AAS instead of SAA, and it doesn't matter. Either way, it just means that you have the two angles and then the side that isn't in between them. And then when that happens, you know that the whole triangle has all the stuff inside it being congruent. And then again, you have HLR, hypotenuse leg, and a right angle. Sometimes you will just see hypotenuse leg. We already talked about that. And that happens when you have right triangles, and then the hypotenuse and just one of the legs is congruent. And when that happens, then you know that the whole triangle here is congruent to the whole triangle here, because these parts were congruent on both of them. You're like, well, Miss Erna, what's the big deal about that? Nothing. It's just the special one that you can say with two things, and it talks specifically about how big the angle is. This only works in right triangles. Okay? Now, false statements. These are statements that just don't tell you enough to tell you that the triangles are for sure congruent. They might be, but if you see angle, 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 the AAA, or if you see side, side angle, either one of those, you just don't know enough. The triangles might be congruent, but they might not be congruent. You can't tell with these guys. And so angle, 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 if you see that, you just don't know enough. How do you remember that you can't do side, side angle? Well, I mean, look at the fella. If you wrote this backwards, you'd be doing something very inappropriate for school, and you'd also be doing something very inappropriate for doing triangles being congruent. So make sure you don't look for this guy or this guy if you're trying to prove triangles congruent. You're only going to prove triangles congruent with those other schemes. These ones are only maybes. Now, the fun thing about angle, angle, angle is that this does tell you that the triangles are similar, meaning that they're the same shape, but one of them might be a great big version from when you zoomed in or zoomed out, and the other might be smaller. So all the angles match, but one might be teeny tiny, and one might be great big. So angle, angle, angle tells you that for sure, but it's not for sure to tell things are congruent. That means they're all the same size and shape. Now, hypotenuse leg right is a very special case of side, side angle. Again, this doesn't usually give you enough information, but if you do have hypotenuse leg, that one does tell you congruent. So it's a special case. That's why we specifically called it hypotenuse leg right and not just side, side angle. Because side, side angle is not enough to tell you anything. It just makes you look like a donkey. All right, and so to test this out, we're going to look at some examples and see which of these congruency things it ends up using to prove it. Now, in order to do this the way I want to do it, I actually have to come out of presentation mode so that I can make these big and small and do all the fun stuff with it. So if I had this guy here, and looked at these triangles and pull them up and over and really make them big so you can look at them. Okay? Now in this scheme, I have this single line angle is congruent to this single line angle. So I've got an angle of each triangle congruent. Keeping track is very helpful. Then I have this double line angle and this other double line angle also being congruent. So I have another angle being congruent. And then I look at it and go, well, do I have anything else? Well, I don't know if these sides match. I don't know if these sides match or if these sides, I don't have any of the sides. Oh, but these are vertical angles, so I know that these must be congruent. So I have a third angle. Well, yay, I have 3 pieces. But angle, angle, angle doesn't tell me enough. These might be congruent, but one of them might be slightly bigger or smaller. This is not enough information with angle, angle, angle. And so in this case, I would grab my mouse. I'm going to shrink him back down to size because he's just way too big now. Come here, buddy. Let's get you nice and small. There you are. I know I'm off screen. And I'm going to put him under not enough information because there's just not enough there to tell me whether that guy is going to be able to be congruent triangles or not. It's just not enough. So I'm going to take this yellow fella here, make him nice and fat, and let's look at him and what pieces we've got here. So in this one, I've got a right angle here. Oh, and since this is a linear pair, I know that this one's right. So on my left triangle and my right triangle, I have a congruent angle. So I have one angle, and it happens to be right. So I'm just going to keep that in my mind because maybe this is hypotenuse leg. I just don't know. And then you go, what else do I have? Oh, this side of this triangle is marked congruent to this triangle. So I have a side that's congruent. And then you go, do I have anything else congruent? Well, this is where you have to think back to the start of the year. We have an idea that you can be congruent to yourself. If you recall that one, that was our reflexive property. You are always congruent to yourself. Well, this line right down the middle here, he's going to be congruent to himself. So this guy is congruent to himself. So I have another side. And oh dear, I probably can't do this. This one might not work, except the angle is a right angle. And one of these sides is my hypotenuse. And since I have that, I can get around not using angle, angle, side, and instead say I have hypotenuse and a leg of a right triangle. So I have hypotenuse, leg, and a right angle. So this one is congruent using our hypotenuse, leg, right rules. So I'm going to shrink you back down, buddy, and put you here and say you belong in hypotenuse, leg. And then I'm going to come find this last guy over here. He's purple. Pull him up and make him nice and big. Come here, buddy. There you go. Yes, I talk to inanimate objects. You should imagine what it's like in the classroom. Now for this guy, I do see that I have an angle of each one being congruent. And then these angles of each one are also congruent. And then I have a side of each one congruent. But this is where, remember, you got to put it in the right place. Is this side in between the two angles connecting them, or is it outside? In this case, this side is not on the side in between the angles. It's off somewhere else. So I can either put it in front or I can put it in back, and I don't care. In this thing, it shows AAS for angle, angle, side, so I'm going to write it angle, angle, side. Whichever way is fine, it's the same thing. And so this guy is going to be an angle, angle, side guy. So I'm going to make him nice and small once again and drag him down here to angle, angle, side. And now we know that this triangle can be congruent by angle, angle, side. These two triangles can be congruent by hypotenuse, leg. But these two triangles, I don't have enough information to tell if those guys are congruent. Okay? And so now, let's see, let's scroll down to a next one and try a couple more. So this light blue set of triangles here, let's see if they're congruent. Oh, you didn't get big. Come here, guys. All right. Now on these triangles, to see if they're congruent, again, I'm looking for 3 parts to tell me if these guys are congruent. I have a single line angle and a single line angle here, so I know these 2 guys must be congruent. And then I have another set of angles that I can tell are congruent to each other. And then I have this side that is congruent to each other. And I notice that this side is actually sandwiched in between the 2 angles. So my side is sandwiched in between the angles. So I have proved that these are congruent using angle, side, angle. Now just for giggles, let's name these guys. Let's say this one was M and N and L. And this guy is A and B and C. Now if you said these triangles were congruent, the way you would say that would be by naming the triangles and making sure you put the stuff in the right order. So if I started with A on this one and named it triangle ABC, to say it's congruent to the other triangle, I have to match up the right pieces. So in this one, A is congruent to L. So I would have to put the L first so it matches up with the A being first in this one. In this triangle, I said the B next. The B is congruent to the N. So N has to be the next guy in this triangle. And then lastly, I put C for my first triangle, and that one is the only one left over, and so the only one left over here is M, and it goes at the last. So you would say that these are congruent by saying that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle LNM. And that would make sure that not only do you know they're congruent, but you have named them in such a way that anybody who reads this knows exactly which pieces match up with the other pieces. And so, okay, little buddy, let's make you nice and small again. Shrink you back down. And this one was an angle, side, angle. Come here, big fella. Come on, little fella. Now you're a big fella. On this guy, I see that I have a side here congruent to a side here, that you know they're congruent because they're each marked with only one hash mark. And so I've got a side. Can you even see that? Not very well. Let's pick up something you can really see. There you go. You can see that one. Now I know that I have another side with 2 marks on each triangle. So I have a second side that's congruent on each one. Uh-oh, this is going into dangerous territory. If I have an A in front or in back here, I'm toast. I won't be able to say anything. That's one of the bad ones. But then you look, oh, I have an angle, but it's the one between, sandwiched in between these 2 sides. So my angle is in here. Oh, good. That one we're allowed to do. Side, angle, side tells me that these triangles are congruent. So I can take this guy now, shrink him back down, and put him in my side, angle, side. Let's do one more. Come here, buddy. Oh, the other ones cover him up. I didn't realize that would happen. So let's move you over here just a little bit. You're still in the picture. You can do this. Okay. So now this guy, you look at it and you go, okay, I've got an angle congruent to an angle. I've got a side with 3 marks, or an angle with 3 marks and an angle with 3 marks, so they're congruent. And then I have an angle with 2 marks and an angle with 2 marks. That gives me angle, angle, angle. That means they are for sure similar, but I don't know if these sides are the same length, so I cannot say that these are congruent. There's just not enough information with angle, angle, angle to go there. And so this is one of the ones where you have to say, I'm sorry, you're cute and all, but I just don't know enough about you to say that you're congruent, and you leave them behind. You can be done here, but if you want to continue watching, I'm just going to do a few more examples. And so if that's all you're going to watch, thank you for watching. If you want to see a few more, just keep on watching, and I'm going to do a couple more examples just to let anybody who wants to feel real comfortable with it. This guy right here, I have a side congruent to a side. Then I have, a side that's got 3 marks and a side that has 3 marks. And I have a side that has 2 marks congruent to a side that has 2 marks. That's all that's on there, but that's okay because SSS, side, 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 is one of those things that told me that the triangles could be congruent. So I can say, yes, these triangles are for sure congruent. And so I'm going to shrink you down and park you in there. And we know those triangles are congruent by side, side, side. Now I can come over here and pick up these brown guys, make you big. And on this one, okay, I have a right angle. Immediately my mind gets excited. This might be my hypotenuse leg, but I'm not sure. Let's make sure. So I've got a right angle. Oh, if I've got a right angle, I have hypotenuses, and look, my hypotenuses are congruent. So I have hypotenuse on each of these congruent. And then I've got a leg here with 2 marks and a leg here with 2 marks. So my legs are congruent. So I do indeed have hypotenuse leg right here. So I can say that yes, these triangles are going to be congruent by HLR, or by just HL if you're lazy. And you can come put him down here in hypotenuse leg, knowing, comfortable and happy that those triangles are indeed congruent. When are you going to use this in your future life? I don't know, but it never hurts to learn how to think and how to make sure you're following rules and to see if stuff follows the rules. So let's check this guy. Here I have an angle congruent to an angle, and here I have a side next to it congruent to a side. And here I have another angle congruent to an angle, but this one is not the one that sandwiches this side. It doesn't connect to it. And so I don't want to put it and make a sandwich out of this side because my angles don't make a sandwich out of the side. So I'm going to just stick that angle off on the end because it doesn't make a sandwich. I don't want to do angle, side, angle here, because that would have the side sandwiched in between them. And that's not the case here. Don't have that. And so instead, I have side, angle, angle, or angle, angle, side. But guess what? That's still one of the good ones. That's one of the ones that tells me my triangles are congruent. So yes, you get to join the party of congruent triangles because you've got all the pieces you need to say it. And look, there's more. So come back, mouse. Where are you? Where'd you go? Where'd you go? Where'd you go? There you are. Let's do just a few more if you're still interested. Now this one's a fun one because it doesn't have all the information marked. You have to just think about it and figure it out, but I made it too big. So let's make him a little smaller. I got real excited about this one. So let's look at you up here. There you go. So here I have this side with 2 marks congruent to this side with 2 marks. And then I have this side with 1 mark congruent to this side with 1 mark. So I have a side and I have a side. Oh, I guess there's nothing else that's congruent unless you remember that you can tell things are congruent even if they aren't marked. And in this case, I have a set of intersecting lines, which means I have a set of vertical angles. And we know that vertical angles are congruent. So I have an angle being congruent. But where is that angle? Is it outside of the 2 sides or is it sandwiched in between? Well, let's trace our 2 sides to where they connect and see that my angle is there at the vertex where each of the sides match up. On this guy, I'm sandwiched, and on this guy, I'm sandwiched. So this angle should go in between the 2 sides. So this setup is actually showing me side, angle, side congruency. And then, bonus, let's name them and see what goofy stuff happens here. I'm going to call this guy X, Y, Z, and I'm going to call this guy P and Q over here. Why not? And then you go, okay, I want to say if the triangles are congruent. So I'm going to start with this one and call him triangle X, Y, Z. And I want to say he's congruent to this other guy, but you got to be careful and put them in the right order. I don't know all the angles, so I don't know which angle is congruent, X is congruent to. But I do know I can go from X to Y. That's how I wrote it here, is going from X to Y. That went along the side that had a double mark right here. So for my other triangle, I would need to go from 2 of them that have the double thing. And oh, look, That's the Q and the Y, okay? And so I can go with X, Y, I'm going to go from Q to Y. That way, I've got this side is congruent to this side, X, Y, and Q, Y. Well now, if I go from X to Y to Z, I have gone back down the side that's single. So if I go from Q to Y, I have to go back up the single side just like I went down the single side here. So if I go up the single side that has just one mark, that takes me to P. And I have made sure to put them in the proper order so that now I know that angle X must be matched up with angle Q. Angle Y must be matched up with angle Y. That's good to know. Y is congruent to itself. Reflexive property is our friend. And then Z is congruent to P. So this triangle is actually flipped over from where it's congruent. So this diagonal is over here. And so it kind of messes up your order a little bit. So you got to watch out for those ones that are a little twisty or a little reflected because they can play a number on you. So just watch out for those guys. But you're still a side angle side and you're still too big. I just got excited about this one. I just don't want to shrink him. And then lastly, this little pale blue guy, he's not hurting anybody. He's just hanging out waiting his turn. And let's see what we have on this one. On here, I have a side congruent to a side. And then I have a side double marked, congruent to a side double marked. And that's it. I don't have any connecting things to tell me I have vertical angles. I don't have any parallel lines so that I can see alternate interior or something like that. I don't have any shared sides so that I can say a side is congruent to itself. So I don't have any more information. Well, two things is not enough information to tell me that these guys are congruent. So I just don't know with these guys. And so you guys have to go into the corner and be down here. There's not enough information to tell. They might be congruent, but you know, looking at them, I kind of don't think they are. They just don't look like it to me. And I have so many more I could do, but you know what? I think I'm just going to look for the goofy ones. So here's an example that's good to look at. See, here's an example that's kind of like the last one. Ooh, that's not going to show up at all. Let's get black here. Black's not going to really show up either, but whatever. Okay, so I've got a single line and a single line on these sides showing their congruence. So I still have a side congruent. And then this one I have a double and a double. So I have another side congruent. I don't have anything else marked, but I can use my big brain and go, oh, this side that they share is going to be congruent to itself. So it's the line for the left triangle. It's also the line for the right triangle, so that's a third side. So this guy is actually congruent by side, side, side. And the way I marked it now, it looks like a pointy football. And you're very impressed, I can tell. And so this guy actually works by side, side, side congruency. Even though they didn't tell us all three sides, we could use the 900 IQ to figure it out. Okay, so I'm going to move down to the next one. Come here, mouse. Where'd you go? There you are. And check out what this one has to say. Ah, I like this guy. No, well, what can I do here? Ooh, this one's a fun one. Let's try this guy. So on this guy, I have a single side that's matched up with a single side. So I definitely have a side congruent on each one. And then I have a double side marked with a double side. And so, yeah, two sides are congruent. But let's check out this. I have an angle. Oh. And is my angle in between them? Well, if the angle was in between, it would be there. And then I could say side angle side. But I don't know that angle. It's not the angle in between. And since it's not the angle in between, what I've got is side, side angle. And oh, that is so inappropriate in school. You can't use that word. We can't use side, side angle. So nope, this guy does not have enough information to give us what we want. So he goes to the corner, and we just don't know if those guys are congruent. They just didn't tell us enough stuff. Then we look at this one, And let's see. This one looks like it could be interesting. So on this one, I have an angle and an angle, these big fat angles here. And then I have the little skinny angles right here, and they're both congruent, so I have an angle and an angle. And then I have the side that connects the two angles here, and I have the side that connects the two angles here. And so since it connects them, it's in between them, and I have an angle side angle congruency here. Okay, so these ones, I can still say they're congruent, and they'll go over here in angle side angle. I didn't know if we had done one of those yet or not. Okay, now the only thing you're gonna have to, there goes my mouse. The main thing you're gonna have to watch out for is trick ones that make you think you have the information you need, but you really don't. So if you had a triangle like this and a triangle like this, and I told you these guys match and these guys match, and I gave you this angle and I gave you this angle, okay? You might be tempted to say that these are congruent by side-side angle or side angle side, but look, this one, there are two sides congruent, but this angle is in between them as if it was side angle side, but this one's not in between. This one is set up like side angle. And so these ones are also not congruent. They don't have enough information because they don't match up the congruent pieces. So watch out for that. Those are little sneaky fellas that'll try and trick you. But that's enough on congruent triangles today. Thank you so much, team. Good luck. See you in the next video.